I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Welcome to Trench Talk. I'm Matt Reynolds, I'm a plumber, and this week, four-time Bathurst 1000 champion Steve Richards joined me on the podcast. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. Steve Richards began his career in karts at 15 years old and went on to become the Australian Formula 4 champion in 1994. His racing achievements are many, including to date being the only driver who has won back-to-back Bathurst Championships, driving for different car manufacturers. After stepping away from the V8 series as a full-time driver, Steve began working through the transition from elite sportsman to that of a successful business owner. He started his own team to race the Australian Carrera Cup in 2011, a series he went on to win in 2014. Steve has now partnered with BMW and is competing in the Australian GT Championship Series. We discussed growing up in a famous racing family, preparing for and winning Bathurst, the business and future of motorsport, running his own team, including finding sponsorship and developing revenue streams, the cost of crashing, his plans to work with the next generation of racers, and his favourite car. If you'd like to know more about Steve, his company and future projects, both on and off the track, you can connect with him on Facebook by searching for Steve Richards Motorsport. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the subscribe button inside your chosen podcast player to get all future releases of Trench Talk. Enjoy my chat with Steve Richards. Steve Richards, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem, Matt. Good to catch up again.
Now, we're in your workshop this morning.
Yep.
How involved do you get personally in the preparation, upkeep, maintenance of your fleet of cars?
Well, you probably, in terms of the hands-on role of doing that, not much anymore. But I've just found over the time as the Steve Richards Motorsport as a business has got a little bit bigger, my time really is best served now on the organisation and management of doing what we do. So aside from, when I say not hands-on, I actually drive the truck on most occasions up to and from race meetings, but the actual labour content and what we do on the car, not so much anymore.
We were just talking before we got started. You said there's about, the truck rolls in after a race.
Yep.
And there's about, you said 55 hours of preparation before it goes out the door again.
Yep.
What happens in that time?
Yeah, so give or take, that's probably the average. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less. But essentially, the preparation of a BMW M6 GT3 that we run in the Australian GT Championship. So basically, what happens is when we buy the car, we buy it through BMW Motorsport in Europe, and it comes with an instruction, essentially an instruction manual, and it gives us an idea of lifing of components, general maintenance of the car, torque settings on different bolts, advised times of replacement of certain parts. So what that enables us to do is really construct a very good budget and an reasonably accurate budget of how we go racing for the year, because we know from a technical spec, we know how many sets of tyres we can use at race meetings. We know a fuel usage figure. We can reasonably accurately determine how much fuel we use. So, going back a bit, what happens is the truck arrives back from wherever it's been. The car's unloaded, the equipment's unloaded. Preparation of tyres. We keep a log of every single tyre that we use through the year. All the tyres are barcoded and serial numbered, so we can see and we know the history of every single tyre, what position it's been on the car, and there's a process of management behind that. We have to manage that. So then tyres are expensive. We don't want to just keep buying new ones even when we go practicing. So we look for the lowest mileage tyres that we use in practice, and then we structure our management. I mean, washing the wheels. When we're washing the wheels, we're inspecting them for defects. We're making sure that those wheels are going to go back on the car in a safe manner. So there's that aspect. There's the resupplementation of any parts that we've used on the weekend that have come out of stock or need to be reordered from damage or use to go back on the car. And then the guys have literally we've developed a mechanical checklist. Kevin, who works with us on the engineering side, Kevin's role is administering all of that workflow, making sure that he's tracking and logging all of the components in terms of their lifing, and then implementing the job list post-race to go to the car, to the mechanics in the workshop or the techs in the workshop to make sure that workflow is followed, that it's signed off, that it's allocated to a specific person, and then the pack up. So we go through the situation where we're packing to go to the next race.
And does the car need to be prepared in different ways for different races?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure. And we have a varied a lot of different race formats that we use, from 45-minute sprint races to 12-hour endurance events, and they are very different in the scope of preparation from one to the other. A 12-hour event is a huge monster. I mean, we go from our regular crew of seven people plus drivers to running 2 cars at the 12-hour. This year we had 45 staff.
Oh wow, it's a serious operation.
And as I said, the way our business model works is we don't have full-time employees. We use subcontractors, and then going and finding the balance of those subcontractors to do the work, and also volunteers. We use skilled volunteers that have been in the game for a while, and most of these people have a lot of experience at the highest levels of motor racing in Australia, and they've probably been doing that for a while. They're now gone back into a life where they have more regular 9-to-5 jobs, but they still have a passion for motor racing outside what they do and want to still be involved at a high level. And I guess that's what we sort of provide to them. So preparation for those and resourcing for those very different style of events is part of what I do. I manage that resource and along with the team put together what's required to go to those events.
So it makes logical sense that, for instance, if it's a longer race, you'd need more fuel.
Yep.
Is there also a component of setting the car up differently? Because I'm thinking, and not that I have anything to base this on, that if you are racing for a longer period of time, you need to set the car up so it remains quick, but it's maybe not as hard on tyres and gear. Is there a component of that as well?
Funnily enough, not really, to be honest. I mean, we have a setup for the car that the setup changes vary more so because of the track-specific layout. So whether we're putting 120 litres of fuel in the car and making the car heavy, or just putting 60 kilos in the car for a sprint race, it doesn't really matter. The car's optimum performance is tuned more around the circuit than the style of event. So in saying that, we might have some slightly different electronic settings that we have inside the car in terms of the traction control figuration, or we have the ability in the car to change 6 different engine style maps. Now, generally, the engine ECU maps that we put in are determined by amount of boost, which is related to fuel consumption. So at the longer events, sometimes in order to formulate a strategy, you need to be able to reduce the amount of fuel consumption. Now, that always comes at a cost. Comes at a cost of performance, engine speed, performance, and speed. So you have to manage that sort of stuff more so than the actual car setup.
So this is your own business.
Yep.
So you used to be a driver, and now you've moved into your own operation.
Yep.
How does the business of motorsport work? How do you ensure that when you get to the end of the year, like every other business, that you've made money?
Yep, sure. So I mean, you start with the building blocks of what makes your budget for the year, and you put that in place, and then essentially you have your motorsport's a different game because you're actually going out to people to ask for an investment in their business, and as a reward for that investment, you're then tabling certain products of value that you can bring to their business to expose them and provide value to them. So in terms of profit, you have to be very careful that you're not abusing what that value add is, and claiming more than you can, and that's really determined by the market anyway, because at the end of the day, sponsorship's about how much the company can invest from whether it's their marketing budget or however they go about sponsorship. So it's a tightrope. So it starts there. The building blocks are the running costs of the car. So you start with that, you get that in order, and then basically there are elements to that built in where we have different aspects of our business in terms of a customer program. We have our Steve Richards Motorsport program, which is based around a sponsorship model. Then we also have a customer-based program that we provide a motor racing service to other customers that want to come and join our team. So with that comes our IP, and our IP basically is probably where we form a little bit of our profit. And then crash damage. Now, we have to budget for some amount of crash damage, but that's a moving target and we never know. So generally at the end of the year, your profit margin is dependent on how much parts usage you've had. The less parts you use in terms of crash, then that essentially is your elastic band for profit. So between that, the customer-based program, where you're trying to provide the service to different people that own their cars and want to come and drive those cars under your umbrella because you've got the expertise. And then also we have as part of our program and our association with BMW Australia, we're also the parts provider for BMW race cars. So there's an element of margin in that stuff there. The more parts that we sell, the more profit that we make.
Okay, so there's three elements. Did I get that right?
Yeah, look, and there's lots of other little bits and pieces through the program. You know, our truck provides transport for other cars outside of our program, so we can actually sell off the space in the truck to go, which helps offset our cost to pay for the lease in the truck, but it also, at the end of the day, value adds to create a bit of profit within that little model as well.
And it'd be very much appreciated by some of the smaller teams, I would have thought, because I've just seen your truck and it's not a $20,000 truck, is it?
No,
it's a substantial setup.
No, and that's right. And some people, when I talk about customer motor racing, there are people out there that have a passion for motorsport, and they have successful businesses, and their motorsport is their golf. That's what they desire to do on the weekend.
Yep.
But they don't want to have to invest in all of the capital of a transporter or a workshop or all of the tools required to run their car. They don't have the time to work on the car during the week because they're busy in their business making the money to pay for their hobby.
Yep.
So that's where we step in. We provide a situation and we provide something for them that then they can just arrive and drive, come to the track. We deliver their car to the track. We provide the expertise, a mechanic. We provide a solution for them to then be able to optimise the way that they go and enjoy their sport.
And you're open for business? Are you taking customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. And you know, our business has probably evolved more to underline BMW's customer motorsport program now that we're aligned with BMW to try and encourage people to drive that product, because we now have the building blocks in place to service that. And
you've got IP around that, I suppose, that particular brand of car.
That's right, absolutely.
So you're a major sponsor for the last 8-9 years?
Yes, 7 years this year.
7 years? Mm. Lazer Plumbing and Electrical. How did that sponsorship originally come about?
I think it's a great story. Out of my previous life as a professional V8 supercar driver or professional driver in whatever discipline of motorsport that we were working in, I basically came to the end of the line, but I wasn't finished driving. I wanted to, for a number of reasons, I wanted to start my own team.
What do you mean by the end of the line?
Well, at the end of the line, it's very much perceived that in motor racing, V8 supercars is the pinnacle of the sport in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And when you finish there, when I say you finish there, when your contract's up and you can't get the opportunities don't exist anymore to go racing, people just consider that you're retired. Okay. And that's not the case at all. I looked for a path within the supercar ranks, and I drew a line in the sand and said, well, if I couldn't find myself a contract in a competitive team by a certain point in time, that I would try and start my own team. And I'd already had indications from a number of companies that I'd been working with that they would support me moving forward doing that. Now, I still continued continue to this day as a co-driver in the 2-driver endurance races that the V8 supercars put on. So the Sandown 500, Bathurst 1000, and Gold Coast 600. So I was still getting my fix of supercar racing at that point, but wanted to establish something for when I did decide to stop driving that I could continue within the sport that I loved.
So it was a succession plan.
So it was a succession plan, exactly. Yep. And had an introduction through. We needed to find some more investment in the program, and through a mutual friend, we got in touch with Steve Cole, who's the managing director of Lazer Group Services Management here in Australia, and that led to a conversation. And that conversation basically involved an arrangement whereby the franchise members of the Lazer Plumbing and Electrical Group in Australia could invest in our program, and there were certain elements to that where they would have stakeholding in what we did, and initiatives and incentives that enabled them to promote what we did through their own business.
And what did that mean on the ground level for those businesses?
Yeah, so essentially it was a shareholding sponsorship, and there were different levels of sponsorship that those individual businesses could invest in, and that brought different elements of incentive to their own individual business. And it was based around a relationship marketing program that encouraged the members to bring their customers to have a ride in the car. And then by having a ride in the car, then they were able to not only take away the value of the video to their customer, but it provided an extra contact point that they could go back to and build a relationship with that customer, make it easier for them to go and do business after those styles of event.
Best relationships are built at 220 kilometres an hour, is that what you're saying?
Well, it's essentially right. But, you know, I would actually say that the money can't buy experience of going in the car is definitely something that's a catalyst to be able to go and talk about. But the relationship is built by the business owner when he brings that customer to the day and gets to talk about things other than business at a more personal level with them, and just get an understanding for how they operate as a person and an individual, to have a better relationship with them, make it easier to pick up the phone, and then have the customer more likely to answer his call during the week when they're busy.
And I've been in the car with you, I've done those laps, and people do talk about it 4 and 5 and whatever years later about that few minutes only experience. Like it really runs deep, something that intense in terms of the speed and that. Now, can you say roughly how much it costs for a year to run the team?
Yeah, sure. And look, sometimes
depending on how many times you crash, of course.
Yeah. But you also, you start with your ideal model when you're doing the budgeting for this sort of thing, and say that number is $1 million. Let's just put it there. It's $1 million. Now that's what you need to raise in terms of the capital to go racing and the product that you're trying to promote and add value to your partners. Now sometimes you don't get there, so there are elements where you start then having to trim. You have to trim your budget up. You have to say, well, okay, we're, in our ideal world, we're going to accommodate the team at a $200 room night twin share. Well, no, we've got to reduce that now. Now it's $150. So you have to evolve around the model that you've got. Sometimes you're not going to, in an ideal world, we'll transport only our cars to the races. Well, all of a sudden, we need to then work harder at looking at transporting other people's cars to fulfill that model. So it's like it's exactly the same as any other business. You have an ideal goal of where you need to be. All of a sudden, you might have to trim your wages. It's no different, and that's how we go about the racing model with motor racing.
And do you drive any differently being an owner of the team?
You definitely have more appreciation for looking after your profit margin, which is your damage. And look, it does. Back when I was doing the supercar thing, and I was literally a driver that turned up with my helmet. It was all about, literally whatever it took to get the result, and you didn't have too much concern for taking the paint off a front spoiler or damaging a door or rubbing some panels. You definitely have more of an appreciation when you own your own car, and at the end of the weekend you're going to have to pay an invoice to someone to repair the car.
The Lazer sponsorship, just so I can get this right in my own mind, that was at the start of Steve Richards Motorsport. Yep. So they've been with you the whole time? Yeah,
well, Steve Richards Motorsport as an entity had been operating since 1999 when I first, more or less, I'd been in Europe doing some racing, and I came back and started up Steve Richards Motorsport. So at that point it was more of a personal services business where it was contracting Steve Richards to a team to go and drive race cars.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yep.
So it sort of evolved from that into a fully blown leasing a workshop. Well, in actual fact, Steve Richards Motorsport in its first 2 years as a motor racing company started off in my shed at home, because, as I said to you before, when at the start of what you do, you have an ideal budget where you look at, you have someone come in and do the labour for the preparation on your car. In an ideal world, you'd have a truck driver driving the truck through the night to get to a race meeting. Well, when you don't meet those targets, you scale back. In the first 3 years of our Lazer racing arrangement, Lazer Plumbing and Electrical, I was the mechanic prepping the car before the race weekends. When we get to the race, and that was just because we didn't hit the target of the sponsorship. So we started off small. The truck, we didn't have a truck to start with. I borrowed my dad's truck, or I took the car on a trailer to do our ride days. And then that evolved into a situation where I could build a model around, in order for us to move forward with our sponsorship, we need to present better. So we need a big billboard. We need the truck because it looks fantastic. So we built a trailer that could carry 4 cars. Now, we only had 1 car, but then we sold the other spaces in the truck to help offset the cost of the truck to help with our program. Building a bigger image for our team enabled us to present our brands and our partners better. As that evolved, then all of a sudden I was able to step out of the workshop, get my hands off the tools, stop the move out of our workshop at home that we'd built to a leased facility, and I just found that the more I could do that, the more that I could step off the tools and get more focused and involved in actually looking at ways to generate the income internally as a proper full functioning business, the more successful it became.
Okay.
The more I was able to do it, I had to take some pain. I had to, you run pretty skinny at the start of that, but I just found the time and time again, it was enabling me to do more, to pay, to have the background behind me to enable me to do more in the office.
So it's not, well, you said before, it's not a lot different to building a different type of business, isn't it? Just because you're on the TV, on Sunday or Saturday afternoon or whatever, and standing on podiums, hopefully at the end of the day, the fundamentals of actually building the business are no different.
It's identical, and I think that's where you're exactly right. You see motor racing on the television on the weekend, and most people think it's a hobby. Most people looking from the outside in see it and just believe it's something that you turn up on the weekend, and during the week you're not really doing much. You're sort of just waiting for the next race to come along, and it's far from that. It can be that, but as a proper functioning business, it doesn't exist.
It's just not like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you started in a Porsche, and then you moved to BMW. Yep. Can you talk through the reasons for that transition?
Yeah. So we had 6 years of building the Porsche model, and the Porsche model was brilliant. It's the Porsche Carrera Cup Championships, a global category of motor racing that races in many markets around the world through Europe, Asia, America, and provides a really good foundation, again, because you've got this really good car, you know the running costs, you can set budgets, you can dictate it really well. But like anything, it was very satisfying from a motor racing perspective. We won the championship. We had heaps of podium results, good results, but we were looking to see where we could go from there. What was the next step that we could take with Steve Richards Motorsport? And probably the one thing that the Porsche model couldn't give us was access to working with a manufacturer, because it was a bit of a closed shop. You're a customer of Porsche. You were never going to get the assistance from a financial and technical perspective from that manufacturer, because it was the model didn't allow for that. They couldn't invest in one car because it was seen as being inequitable to their other customers.
Because essentially everyone had the same car.
Everyone had exactly the same car.
And everyone bought a car from Porsche.
That's right.
It worked?
Yep.
So it's a pretty level playing field.
Yeah, and an incredibly good, time and time again it's been proven. It's filtered out the good drivers who have gone on to do fantastic things overseas and in amongst other categories of motor racing. So anyway, being on the ground in motorsport, you're always looking for a new opportunity. BMW had a new car that they were building for their customer racing program in the GT3 category in Europe, which we were well aware of, along with some other manufacturers. And we approached Porsche. I approached Porsche on that. They at the point in time didn't have the money to invest in that program. They were committed to Porsche Carrera Cup. So we started to look at. I started to look at other opportunities, and BMW have a history in Australian motorsport. My family have a history with BMW in Australian motorsport with my dad Jim, and we just started to look at if there were any opportunities. And it literally started with a contact on LinkedIn that I had.
Interesting.
Through BMW, and it was I had met this person maybe once at a race meeting because he was interested in motor racing. We'd connected on LinkedIn, and I just sent an email and I said, it evolved around the fact of, do you have a contact for the new race car that's being built over in Germany by BMW Motorsport? I'm interested to see if there's any opportunity that we could look at purchasing the car to go racing. And that opened a door then to a contact at BMW Australia. Indirectly, I had a friend also that knew some people at BMW. We started a conversation. That's how the door opened there. So, it's timing. It's good fortune. It's all of those things that and I think that's true to business as well. Timing is everything. I guess you make your own luck, but also, being actively involved in something and knowing what's going on in the industry really helped us at that point.
In terms of driving, can you describe what it feels like when you're having a good day, when you're driving really well? Because many people, I suppose, a great Australian pastime is driving, right?
Yep.
Some people even describe it as therapeutic or meditative or whatever. When you're driving competitively, what does it feel like when you're going really well?
It's the pinnacle. It's the pinnacle of absolute satisfaction, because you don't get to drive. In relative terms, we get to drive these cars at race meetings 10 times a year. It's not 10 days a year, or okay, let's say the Saturday as well, but let's say 15 days a year you get to do ultimately what you first set out to do when you're a kid racing go-karts, and you were dreaming about a career in something you loved. Well, now that you're doing it, the ultimate feeling of satisfaction is that moment when you're in the car. Now, sometimes, like anything, there are challenges, and the car's not performing well enough, and you're not getting the results. But when it is, and when it's going well, that's just the sum total of everything you do. That's the cream on the top of the cake sort of thing.
Makes it all worth it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Now, you've won Bathurst in the V8s 4 times.
Yep.
looking back, I've been to Bathurst a couple of times, watching on TV. Not that I know an awful lot about it, but is that particular race, was there anything different in the week leading up to that race, being the major one on the calendar and sort of I suppose that's the pinnacle of races in Australia?
Well, you know, we talk about Bathurst, but Bathurst is really what has underlined Australian motorsport since the very early 60s. You know, the fact of the matter is that the motorsport DNA of Australia has been built around that one circuit, because Bathurst crosses the divide between motorsport and the general sporting landscape. You know, even if people that don't follow motorsport necessarily week in, week out, the passionates, everyone knows about Bathurst. It's like the AFL or NRL Grand Finals. Everyone knows
Melbourne Cup or the Tour de France.
Cup. That's exactly right.
Yep.
So it is very important to win that race. Is from any young driver to any experienced driver, that is just a career defining moment, and the reason why it's so important. So yeah, I mean, for sure, in some elements, the week of that race is probably, you know, having done it a few years now, yeah, there's no other race that still churns the stomach more before the start than that one, because it is so important. It means so much. While as drivers, you know, we're the ones spraying the champagne or not at the end of the race. There's hundreds of people involved in the result, and it's a huge team thing, and that's probably why it's so important in terms of the landscape of sport in Australia.
In terms of your approach, is it a victory being the length that it is, 1,000 kilometres? Can you chase that victory? Do you go out there and you try and seize it, or do you have to wait your time? Because it's a long race, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but there's just so many elements to it. You know, there's the stuff that goes on by the teams at the workshop to prepare for it. It's making sure that those thousands of components in the car are designed correctly, that they're manufactured right, that they're bolted to the car correctly. There's so many places where at any point it could go wrong.
Yeah.
And it could have gone wrong 2 weeks ago when the car was being put together. And then you get to the track, and there's the distractions of you know, dramas in practice, or a possible crash, or an element or operational element that's not going quite right. So I don't think I've ever gone up there thinking, you know, this is our race, you know, this is the one that we're going to win. You have to be prepared for all of the twists and turns that happen over the course of that week, and there's plenty, and every team's got their own story and how it played out. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to be, from a driver's perspective, you just have to roll with the punches. As the day rolls on, things change. You know, there's an accident, a safety car comes out, it starts raining, you're on slicks on a wet track, you've got to get it back to the pits to get the wets on. You've got to do it safely, but you've got to do it quickly. There are just so many elements to that race, and at the end of the day, it's the best team that gets it over the line, and the best drivers on the day that have done the best job for the team to get the result. It's a huge, and at the end of it, while it's an extremely physical race, it's just mentally taxing. Like I've had years where you've been running on adrenaline for probably a week and a half in the lead up to that race. You get to the Sunday night, and all of a sudden I have a massive cold come on. Literally at 9 o'clock, the nose starts running and the head's blocked up, and it's just like it's like a release of whatever has been driving you for that sort of week and a half. So it's pretty intense.
Do you have a favourite victory?
No, I don't. They're all. Geez, isn't it nice we're talking about a favourite victory at Bathurst? But yeah,
or across any discipline.
Nah, you know, it's funny because the victories naturally are the ones. They're the ones that you would think are the most memorable because you've held the trophy up at the end of it. But sometimes some of the most memorable drives are the times you've come from adversity, you've had a problem, or you've just battled the whole day. You haven't won the race, but you've got into a position where you probably shouldn't have, or you've exceeded all of your own personal expectations on the day to get the maximum result because of what happened. And probably one of those was at Bathurst in 2006, and I was driving for Larry Perkins, and we had a huge crash in the first practice session because of a tyre failure, and literally had to rebuild the whole car overnight. We qualified in the top 10, and we raced and finished fourth, which to most people is not that big a deal, but the adversity that we had to overcome through the day, that was a carryover from that crash earlier in the week.
Because you rolled the car.
No, we didn't.
Or
We
did you
didn't
go
roll
onto
it,
its side?
We almost went on. Yeah, almost went onto its side. It hit the. It had a tyre deflate, turned left on Conrod Straight at the end of a practice session, hit the wall at 240 kilometres an hour, went backwards, lifted up over the hump on Conrod virtually on its side, but landed on its wheels and had virtually wrecked every corner of the car. And anyway, we finished fourth, which was really outstanding. So it's those sorts of things. But other moments are, you don't think of it at the time, but it's a pretty cool. I drove 3 times at Bathurst in the 1,000k race with my dad, and in sport, in many other sports, that just doesn't happen. It happens in motor racing because, unlike other sports people, we don't burn out knees. We don't. If you're physically fit and able and mentally in good shape, you can drive through 2 or 3 generations of people. And in 1997, Dad and I drove together and we finished second. We stood on the podium at Bathurst in second. Now at the time, he's just the guy that's helping you and your team achieve a result. You don't think of the how special it was actually standing up there on the podium with him, nearly having won Australia's biggest race. So that's nice to look back on now.
You come from a famous racing family. What was it like growing up under your dad, Jim? Because Jim Richards, along with Peter Brock and Dick Johnson, are probably 3 of the real famous names in the history of Australian motorsport, but certainly through that era. Yeah.
I guess I didn't know any different, so it wasn't a big deal. I spent all of my years as a kid. Our annual family holiday was to Bathurst
For the race.
For the race. That was what we did. Or we went back over Christmas. We went back to New Zealand, which is where Mum and Dad were from originally, to go and visit family. But aside from that, it was Bathurst. So I grew up around all those guys. I didn't see them as in the same light that perhaps the race fans saw them in. They were just people, they were just out there driving, and I had no concept, even as a teenager, as to their standing in the sporting arena in Australia. So when I started doing my racing, I didn't start my go-karting until I was 15. I kind of didn't have an expectation, and I worked out early on that when I didn't have an expectation, but I realised early on that other people that may have had an expectation, that really I couldn't change what people thought, and I couldn't. The only thing I could do was go out every time and do the best I could, regardless of where it was.
You figured that out back then at 15 when you started.
For sure. Yeah, and Dad, even to the point where when I was doing the go-karting, I had to do it on my. Oh no, don't get me wrong. I didn't do it on my own. But I had to work hard at it because Dad was away racing most weekends. So if I wanted to go-karting and have a good time, there was no. At that point in time, I was 15. I was been riding motorbikes for a while. I was mucking around with my own motorbikes in the garage. I had some sense of working on things, nuts and bolts, because I'd been around it the whole time. And the go-karting thing really, because Dad was always away, and not only away racing, but during the week doing promotional bits and pieces, that I had to do it myself. If the go-kart was going to get to the track, if Mum or Dad were had the time to get me to the track, I was going to have to do it on my own. So early on, I was pretty well just as a 15-year-old going to the circuit with a mate of mine who bought a go-kart at the same time, was a few years older, and then got his licence. So that was my way to get to the track. And we'd just go out practising and racing and driving every weekend. And I didn't care what other people really, if there was a perception about me and my driving, I didn't care. I was going out doing what I enjoyed every weekend of the of the month or the year, having a good time. Then all of a sudden, from that, opportunities opened up into car racing, and even those opportunities, while they were supported by Mum and Dad didn't have a lot of time to be involved, not support me, be involved. I had all the support from my family, but he couldn't be involved in it because he was doing his own thing. So that's sort of how it started, and I never, it was probably my late into the second year of my car racing program, where I was still working as a mechanic, an apprentice mechanic at Moorabbin Airport, aircraft mechanic. And I started to realise that maybe there was some sort of hope of making a career out of it. That started to get some results and things moved in the right direction, a little bit of sponsorship. And then that was probably the catalyst for taking it on. But I've always just been happy with who I am and strive to be the best that I can in anything I do. And I guess trying to emulate the lofty heights of Dad, who has done everything and won everything and been successful everywhere, was going to be a pretty hard task. So I was just pretty happy doing what I was doing, and over that time managed to have my, forge my own path and have some decent results.
In terms of your relationship now with your dad, do you talk racing as equals, or is there still a bit of that father-son hierarchy where he, I don't know, maybe leans in at the dinner table and says, a bit wide into turn 3, son, or whatever. He says, do you talk as equals now?
Yeah, we do. And probably not so. I mean, definitely in the early years, that was a big part of our dinner conversation, was asking specific things about that. But no, now we enjoy our car racing together. Dad is still driving, and probably enjoying his motor racing more than ever. He's not in that cutting edge competitive must succeed thing. He's more about going out and enjoying himself and promoting the partners that he has involved with him. But we talk about everything: Formula One, historic racing, sports cars, and he because, and I'm like Dad in the fact that if he wasn't driving cars, he would be a motorsport fan, and he would have been involved in some way in motor racing. But it's just the way the tables work. So yeah, I mean, we have a general interest in the automotive landscape, whether it's cars, motor racing, bikes. That's how we've grown up, and we just have good banter.
Were you at Bathurst in '92?
Yeah, I was. In fact, I spent, that was my second year of car racing in Formula Ford. It was my first year on the national series. I did the first year at state level in Victoria, and I was in the bunker the whole day. I was in the back then. Bathurst sort of had the cars were kept in garages behind pit lane, and then they moved down into like a pit sort of style bunker thing with a garage front, and I spent the whole day there. So I rode the wave of emotion with the whole team that day, and it was, it's funny because the end result of what was said on the podium and you're a pack of arseholes and all that sort of stuff. There was a lot more to that. I mean, there was the emotion of what happened in terms of the rain coming and the massive crashes and all the cars and the red flag of the race, but there was also an element where a very good friend of his during the day had passed away. He had a heart attack during the race and crashed his car, and through that whole day no one really knew what had happened. And the announcement of his death came through midway through the race, and Dad was out of the car when that happened. And
so he knew during the race?
Yeah. So he knew. So he'll never say that, and he still probably says to this day that wasn't a factor. But the podium thing was a bit out of character for Dad, and I do think that while the race was going on, there was so much going on behind the scenes in terms of that. I mean, Denny Holm was a great family friend who used to come and stay at our place when he would come over from New Zealand. So it was a bit more than just a motor racing associate that we had respect for. It was a person that we knew very well. So I always think, and my mum thinks that was probably a factor as well.
In the end, I mean, you can Google Bathurst 1992 podium and it'll come up on YouTube. You can sort of see what it was all about. But essentially what happened was a storm came in late.
Yep.
And then they actually sort of backdated the finish of the race.
Yep.
Which rendered your dad and his partner, I can't remember his partner. Who's his partner? Scaife. Scaife was his partner, yeah. They become the victors even though they didn't cross the line first.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
Dick Johnson
That's right.
Across the line first. Interesting. What involvement does your mum have? Because you can find as much as you're willing to look for about your dad, but we don't hear much about your mum at all. What's mum like?
Yeah, I mean, mum's been there right from the outset. You know, from when they met at a car club function. You know, way back in Auckland, back in 1968 or 67 or 68. So, mum's known about the car racing thing the whole time, and she's been, heavily involved in life, supporting a partner, husband that's car racing, and that's not an easy life. Dad in the early years was financing things, working as a mechanic to try and buy the next stage of his career to move up. Not unlike what I'm doing to a degree now. Yeah. And Mum was there. She was his backstop. She was his backstop. Never really at the forefront of what was going on, but without Mum there, I'm sure, without Mum supporting Dad in making these big financial decisions when they had bugger all money to live, let alone how we're going to buy a house or where are we going to get, how are we going to earn our next dollar. She went through all that. It would have been easier for her to walk away, to be honest.
Well, probably lucky for you that she did early on, right?
That's right. Yeah.
When you talk about the future of motorsport, where do you see it? Are we still going to be watching cars go around the track being driven by actual drivers when we're all driving Teslas?
Yeah, I think that there's going to come a time where it evolves further in that direction, and motorsport at the moment as an industry is trying really hard to move into that space. But I think the reality is at the moment it's very costly. It's a very costly sport to move into that technology at the moment. There's not really, you look at motor racing as a pyramid, and at the top is where all the money is and where all the investment is and where the technology can exist.
So but when be F1?
Formula One and world sports cars and anything that the manufacturers are wanting to be involved in to prove their wares, that's where it exists. Formula E now is probably evolving and emerging as the next big thing. Now, Formula E is like Formula One, but they're totally electric. The cars are all electric, and the manufacturers in the last 6 months, I think there's been, in the last 12 months, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche have all made a commitment to race in Formula E, and that's purely to drive their E technology from their road cars into motor racing. But as a customer, that's non-existent. We can't buy a commercially available electronic powered system that will enable us to go car racing. So I think from amateur style racing through to national level motorsport in this country, we're a long way off it. But I'm saying that we know how quickly technology moves, but I would say we're still 15 to 20 years away from that being a reality. And who knows what the automotive industry looks like in 15 to 20 years. It may have died. There might not be any motor racing. It might be
spaceships and the Jetsons.
Well, it might be automated cars driving around the track. I don't know. I think there's there's a lot of scope because traditionally motorsport as a sport tends to be more reactive than proactive, but that's changing. And as that's changing, that's making things move faster.
All the governing bodies are going to be forced to look forward and quick, aren't they? Because they're going to get they'll get gobbled up if they don't.
Absolutely.
Because as you say, that landscape is changing, whether it be quickly or not. It's definitely moving in that direction, right?
Yep.
Do you have any specific exercise programs, regimes that you follow to get yourself ready to drive?
No, I when I say I don't, I do still keep myself in reasonable condition because it's a huge factor in being able to drive the car at 100% all of the time that you're in it. And you know, stepping over the mark doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a crash, but it means that, you know, even dropping a position has a big impact on your result because it is so hard to pass. It's so competitive. So you have to you do have to keep yourself in reasonable trim. Probably nowadays, from me, I'll be totally honest, I train now more for enjoyment than I do for ensuring a robust routine that keeps me in optimum shape. Because the reality is now, I'm not just a driver. I'm a manager. I'm a business of our business, and it takes a lot of time. So I try and prioritise some time for myself to go and do my training, but it's not like it was when all I had to do was turn up with my helmet and drive a race car. I could actually manage my day 2.5 or 3 hours of time pre and post preparation to make sure I was doing something that actively made me fit. Nowadays I do it from enjoyment. I love going mountain bike riding. I get on my trainer in my garage gym at home. I work out because I enjoy it, not because I have to. And I'm not strict on the times because my time now is better spent doing other things to help the business.
You're in a different phase now, but do you miss that? Just turn up with your helmet, just that singular focus. Do you miss that at all?
Well, I still get it. I still, for 3 races a year, when I co-drive with Craig Lowndes in his car, I get that, and I do. I love it. I love turning up and not having the noise in the background of, you know, how the guys getting to the track, what's happening when they get to the airport, how we're moving people around. I do enjoy that, and by no means do I take a back step on it, but it's a bit more relaxing in some ways. The performance that you have to achieve on the track is definitely not, and the commitment that you have to make to the team to be there and consume yourself in it is still challenging. But when I'm at a race meeting, every waking minute, if I'm not in the car, I'm thinking about what's happening around, how are we moving, trying to make sure that as a team we don't drop the ball. Well, that's taken away from me at those races.
Yeah.
The team is in place. They have an incredible structure. All I have to do is make sure I'm doing a good job. And that's a lot easier, believe me.
What's the most important goal or objective you're pursuing right now?
For me, it's actually in the space of, you know, I look at my sort of long term. You know, what happens when and there is going to come a time, it's reality, when I stop driving, I stop doing the co-driving, and I'm focusing more on where we are. But for me, it's
from a business perspective.
From a business perspective, but for me, it's also, you know, while I've now got a son that's doing go-karting, and I'd love to see him at some point further an opportunity in motor racing. It's actually also more about where's the next generation of young motor racing talent in this country coming from, and I want to be able to put some stakes in the ground to make a contribution to that, and that to me is probably the next phase of where Steve Richards Motorsport is heading, and it's how do we support the next generation of young driver coming through, whether it's in our car, it's through propelling them through our system to do what they want to do. Do they want to race supercars in Australia? Do they want to go overseas? And I'd like to think that within the industry I've got a bit of credibility where I have some really good relationships with some of the people at the highest levels of the sport, and that I can be an influence to someone that I perceive has a natural ability and will do a very good job in the sport. So that's what I want to do. That's where I see the next 5 years. That's what I'm working on. I'm working on how do we put a structure in place within Steve Richards Motorsport that supports that.
And have you given any thought to what that may look like?
Absolutely.
What might it look like? Can you give us anything?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I want to use the platform that we have available to us, which is our connection with BMW and BMW globally. They have a junior motorsport program in Europe, and whether you know, some young guys, they don't want to move overseas and race on the world stage, but they might want a career in Australia. Well, if they want a career in Australia, I'd like to think that Steve Richards Motorsport will be the enabler for them to do that. And if we can find someone that has the ability and has the right personal being, and you know, it's not just about developing a young race car driver. It's about developing good young human beings as well.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, so that's sort of what I want to do, and I believe that with our connection at BMW, if that person does want an opportunity overseas, that I can be part of a pathway that can open a door in that direction as well, because we do have a good relationship with the guys at BMW Motorsport. So that's sort of what, and starting it at the lowest levels, you know, starting at go-karting, finding some other categories within the motor racing bubble that exist to bring them through and nurture them and you know, put them in touch at a corporate level with the right people and expose them to what motor racing is, and it's not just about driving, it's about all the other things.
It's interesting because I've come across this sort of scenario a few times now, and there's a bit of an unwritten obligation, isn't there, to ensure the future of your trade, your sport, whether it be through getting apprentices or putting them on and training them, or helping, you know, young kids coming through and just giving them a hand, if you like, pointing them in the right direction and helping them to flourish, I suppose, in the right direction. Just a couple more questions, Steve, and we'll wrap up. If you'd only have one car in your garage of any choice, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And for me, it would be the original McLaren sports car that was made. It was a 3-seater. It was called McLaren F1, and it had a V12 BMW engine in it. It was the fastest production car ever built at the time. I think it did 380 kilometres an hour somewhere. Wow. But it was still raw. You know, there was no electronic aids. There was no. But it was a very, very safe car. So that's what I would have.
What's the fastest you've been in a car, out of interest?
I think a bit over 300 kilometres an hour. I think. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
If you could have one law changed, what would it be?
Well, probably based around what we do, and that's driver education. I think that it's, without delving too deeply into the political side of things, you know, driver education is something that we all think we get our licence. It's our right to get our licence, and really it should be a privilege. We should make it harder. We should make people go through more of a, you know, you hand over a licence to someone, they get to jump in a car and travel down a two-way road at 100 kilometres an hour within 3 metres of one another, and we dictate that the white line is a safety barrier. You know, I mean, to me it's a crazy scenario. But how do you legislate for that? How do you know, who's the expert? Who's the driving expert? Who's the person that says you must drive like this or do that? But to me, compulsory driving education is something that it would be great to change. Do
you have any favourite books or documentaries that you can recommend?
I'm a bit of a doco fan. I probably like a lot of people, I like stories of inspiration. You know, things that people have done, things that you know, people have got. There's nothing specific comes to mind, but when, you know, people have pulled themselves out from the face of adversity to do whatever they don't and have become successful doing it. And success doesn't mean they've ended up with $1 million at the end of it. Success to me is they've reached a goal. You know, they've achieved a goal. That's the sort of stuff that I like.
Have you got any parting words or anything else before we wrap up?
Probably the biggest thing for me is, you know, we're all on some sort of journey, taking a path that we choose, and at the end of the day, again, success is we're all looking for some sort of success. The success isn't monetary. It's not. But it's more about success to be happy, to have a good balance in your life, to be doing the things that you love, but also have the time to hang out with your family and do the things that encourage and build them. And that to me, you know, is what I do. That's what it's all about.
And if someone wants to get in contact with you in regards to the programs you might run in the future or whatever, what's the best way to do that? Yeah,
probably just on Facebook or email. I'd have no questions at all about handing out. Facebook's the best. So Steve Richards' Facebook page or email.
We'll make a note of that. Yep. All right, Steve, thank you for having me in, taking me for a tour around the back and showing me the ropes. I'll let you get back to your day. Thank you very much for doing this.
No problem, mate. Nice to catch up after a while.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ symbol followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.